Hey, everybody, welcome to the Through It podcast. It's a special broadcast here for this weekend because we have an interesting thing that's popped up, and unfortunately, time is of the essence. I'm Paul, that's Holly. Holly, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. Okay, let's get to it. Let's introduce our guests and who we're going to cut to here in just a second. And what's tell everybody what's going on, I guess.
Yeah, as you mentioned, time is of the essence, and this is a unique story that we're sharing today. And it's in regards to Sister Margaret Ann Pahl, who was a nun in Toledo, Ohio, for the Mercy Hospital back in the day. And she was strangled and stabbed to death on April 5th in 1980 and passed away. And ultimately, the murderer was not convicted until May 11th of 2006, who was priest Gerald Robinson, who Sister Margaret worked with for a number of years. He passed away in prison, and we are here today with Claudia Vercellotti, who our paths keep crossing, where we have a lot of mutual friends, and she was is a member of the Catholic Church and experienced sexual abuse herself, which is why the story has really kind of tugged at her heartstrings, and it's why she's been involved in trying to make things right. And we'll get more into that in the podcast. And we are equally blessed to have the nephew of Sister Ann Pahl with us today, and that's Mr. Lee Pahl.
Okay, well, this is quite a story, and unfortunately, you've heard a lot about it nationally with the Catholic Church covering a lot of stuff up, and it happened right here in Toledo. So, yeah, let's get to it, I guess. Let's get these folks on here, and thanks very much for tuning by to the Through It podcast. Let's get started.
Claudia, I know you've been heavily involved in this case, and I didn't know if you would mind sharing with us kind of how you got involved and why you're so passionate about this.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you both very much for having Lee and I on today. This is extremely timely as we head towards City Council. The agenda meeting is July 7th, and the actual vote is on July 14th. And what happened was, as you know, Father Gerald Robinson was convicted. He is the first Catholic diocesan priest ever convicted in this country of murdering a Mercy nun, and right here in Toledo, Ohio. And so to understand the murder case, you have to understand the climate and what was going on during this time. And since about 1995, when I first came forward to the bishop quietly with my own abuse story, as I was abused by a church leader within the Catholic Church, I came forward with this very naive notion of I'm going to fix the church sex scandal and get married in my Catholic church. Check, check. And neither has happened. But that was my naivety back then. And I quietly came forward wanting to be a part of the solution from the inside out. What I learned in 2002 as the Boston clergy sexual abuse scandal opened, the world's eyes really with their groundbreaking coverage, was just about the institutional cover-up that was pervasive across the United States, including in here, Toledo, Ohio. So I broke my silence in 2002, and I've been speaking up ever since. And what that's done is that's brought victims to me and information to me and insider documents to me, and I've been able to cross connect victims. And we really, really were playing whack-a-mole with the Toledo Catholic Diocese from about 2002, when the Boston scandal broke, to all the way up until Father Gerald Robinson's arrest and beyond. We would uncover information. The Toledo Catholic Diocese would let out the bare minimum in the media, and then we would come behind them with the truth, and we would expose them very publicly. So there's nothing I ever say that I can't back up that hasn't been publicized, well publicized, all throughout this process. Well, during that time, Father Gerald Robinson was always rumored to have been the priest that got away with it, the priest that got away with killing the nun. Now, I didn't know Lee at that time, but I remember the murder of Sister Margaret Ann because I attended Toledo Catholic Diocese hippie church in the 1970s and 80s. It was called Community of the Risen Christ. And we were a hippie church that met on the fourth floor of the Catholic Club. Our altar was on wheels. And it was really just more of a progressive church. Girls could be serving at the altar, which had already always historically been reserved for boys. And so we would drive by Mercy Hospital on our way to church every Sunday. My parents were very Catholic. We were raised Catholic. I went on to be educated at a Mercy High School, Macaulay High School. And so I'm well familiar with the Sisters of Mercy. And Father Robinson had always been rumored to be the priest that got away with it, but that's all we really knew until 2003, when a victim of clergy sexual abuse came forward to the Diocesan Review Board. They all across the country, they had impaneled these review boards, well intended, misguided people really appointed to these boards across the country, including here in Toledo, Ohio, and they were to hear these cases that were beyond the statute of limitations, among others, of abuse. And then the church was going to figure out kind of what to do with these cases. You know, the bishops all convened, it's important to know, in 2002 in June in Dallas, and they signed what it's commonly referred to as the Dallas Charter, and where they pledged openness, honesty, and transparency, and then returned to their diocese, put together these little boards and wrote all these shiny policies where they promised to be transparent and no longer cover for clerics and church leaders who would rape and molest children, if you can imagine. And this was really, the cover up was very systematic across the United States, how these cases were handled. And so their response in kind that was the same. They were going to put together these boards. Jane Doe comes forward before the board in 2003, June 11th, 2003, and she says, you know, I was ritualistically abused, and she implicates several Toledo priests and order priests, and including Father Gerald Robinson. And when we heard that name, we knew that that was the lore of him, that he had always gotten away with it, the priest that killed the nun that got away with it. That's all we knew at that time. Now, Jane Doe alleged that she had been ritualistically abused at that time. What was compelling to me wasn't even her allegations. What was compelling to me was the Toledo Catholic Diocesan response. That afternoon, the Toledo Catholic Diocese lawyer, Tom Pletz, drafted a letter, and it was dated June 12th, but I had it in my hands June 11th, and it said to the review board, there's no need to go to the police or the prosecutor with this information. Her entire file had been reviewed a year ago. And I knew the math wasn't mathing because Jane Doe had just been there that day. So how did the prosecutor's office review this file a year ago? The math wasn't mathing. To me, that was the actions of a decidedly desperate man. That was June. The letter was dated June 12th. I had it in my hands June 11th, the same day that she attended that review board. Now, fast
Claudia,
forward. Yes.
let me ask you, because I want to keep up with the story here. So
Yes.
at this time, first of all, and you did say it earlier, you had your own abuse issues with the churches and all. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming forward. I'm very glad you're not being quiet about it, because all we hear the past many years, ooh, we just moved somebody out of the way and they're in another place, another country, and that's a giant issue. And thank you for bringing this, and I'm sorry you got to go through this. I do now, but catch me up with the story. So at this point in time, you said the priest that got away with it is. Do we not know who murdered Sister Margaret at this time? Do we not know?
Oh, we do, because so if to catch you up, so June 27th, the Toledo Catholic Diocese lawyer sends out a second letter to the review board, and it says, and I'm paraphrasing, the last paragraph says, and to the extent that you continue to overstep your boundaries and do this independent investigation, we will continue to offer our input. And with those two pieces of information, Jane Doe's allegation, and then what followed was the Toledo Catholic Diocese began maligning publicly one of the review board members that they had picked to be on this review board. He was a psychologist, and he said, hey, this matter belongs in front of the police and in front of prosecutors. I'm a mandated reporter. This information belongs there. When the Toledo Catholic Diocese began maligning him publicly, in conjunction with those two letters and how the math wasn't mathing, we knew something was wrong. And so with that, I took those letters and we met with the Ohio Attorney General's office in Bowling Green. And the Ohio Attorney General's office came calling on the Lucas County Prosecutor's office, and the cold case squad looked at the information and they went and interviewed Jane Doe. And so I think in the beginning they kind of interviewed her to sort of check the boxes. I think that's my interpretation. They were giving it their due diligence, but they really weren't completely, I don't think, vested until Jane Doe said, was she stabbed in the shape of an upside down cross? Because Holy Saturday is a horribly ritualistic satanic holiday. And was she stabbed in the shape of an upside down cross? And they went back and they looked at the evidence they had the murder weapon. They had that back in 1980. They had a prime suspect back in 1980. And they went back and they looked at that blood splatter and they looked at that altar cloth and they said she was stabbed in the shape of an upside down cross. And
Wow.
with that, the case really picked up steam, and the Lucas County prosecutor, I give them all the credit in the world for thoroughly investigating and bringing that case to trial. It took a tremendous amount of courage to do that. And they were successful in obtaining a conviction. Father Robinson was convicted. And so, but I was still a little skeptic. So I went to the trial every day. I sat there and I watched the testimony, and I watched Lieutenant William Keena and Detective Art Marks come out of retirement and testify about what happened in 1980. They were very clear in their testimony. Their frustration was palpable from where I sat. You could feel their emotion. They were very frustrated. They said that Monsignor Schmidt was instrumental in shutting that case down. And what we know about Monsignor Schmidt is he was a Monsignor who wielded a lot of power and influence within our diocese. He was also a police chaplain, and so he was well connected. And Monsignor Schmidt, even the Toledo Catholic Diocese to this day, when they do fundraisers still in his name, they will say, he was the get it done priest. If you needed funds raised, he was going to do it. If you needed a problem solved, he was going to get it fixed. And so what Lieutenant Keena and Art Marks both testified under oath, unrefuted, during that criminal trial was there was a knock at the door, and Deputy Chief Ray Vetter was there with Monsignor Schmidt, and so was Henry Herschel, which went on to become Father Robinson's lawyer. And they kicked Lieutenant William Keena out of the interrogation room, of his own interrogation that was going on. And what's really critical to understand is Father Robinson had already waived his right to counsel on April 18th. He had waived it again on April 19th. He had already failed one polygraph. His second polygraph was inconclusive, and he had already lied to the police about his alibi. He told the police, I know who did it, but I can't possibly tell you because it was under the seal of confession. So there was a lot of
course.
attention on Father Gerald Robinson at that point, but not initially. I mean, they had interviewed like 250 people and narrowed it down to Father Robinson, especially when they recovered the murder weapon in his apartment right there on site at Mercy Hospital. So like I said, there was a knock at the door. Deputy Chief Vetter was there. He makes the lieutenant get out of his own interrogation. The detective had stepped away to get some paper, the other one. He comes back. He says, Lieutenant, what are we doing? Standing here on the outside of our own investigation. And Lieutenant William Keena testified he thought the investigation was about to be shut down. The door opens about 5 to 10 minutes later. Father Robinson is free to leave. And what was touted as Toledo's most notorious murder investigation of that time is shut down in 3 weeks flat.
Okay. He
Wow.
was convicted in 06. Is that correct?
That's correct. So
Yep.
Okay.
I take the documents to the Attorney General in 2003. They come calling on the Lucas County prosecutor. The prosecutor's office sends their cold case squad to investigate. Jane Doe gives them critical information that helps reopen and reignite the case. And they asked the Toledo Catholic Diocese for everything they had on Father Robinson. They got under 10 pages, 3 to 5 pages. There's more than that in my kindergarten file. Probably says excessive
For sure.
And with that, they executed not one, but 2 no-knock search warrants, and they uncovered internal documents never meant for the light of day. We call them the Father Ray Fisher letters. Father Ray Fisher worked in the Toledo Catholic Diocese in the Chancery. He was writing communications and giving updates to the bishop, and sprinkled all over these short updates are Monsignor Schmidt met with the deputy chief. Monsignor Schmidt met with this person. Monsignor Schmidt's getting him counsel. Monsignor Schmidt's doing this. Monsignor Schmidt has this information. And we stopped and we thought, what is Monsignor Schmidt doing involved in this case? And so then to see those detectives testify really put this into context. And so, we couldn't believe that this had happened. And then to learn that he had a public taxpayer paid street sign dedicated to him, once they had the conviction, I was equally naive and just sure that they were going to quietly take that sign down.
That's perfect. I'm glad you got to that point. 'Cause now I want to go to Lee. Lee Pahl is with us. Lee, you are the nephew of Sister Margaret Ann Pahl. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Where are you in the family at 2006? Are you following this story? Are you getting secondhand? Where are you? Where are you in the family with this whole thing?
I was not involved. I had two aunts still living at that time, which would have been sisters of Sister Margaret Ann. And so any communication from the Sisters of Mercy, the Toledo Police Department, the Diocese of Toledo, which I think was very, very minimal, would have gone to my aunts.
Okay.
So I basically was not involved in this until the trial. I went to the trial the first day with the intention of thinking that someone from our family needs to be present at the trial to be there for sister. And I only intended to go one day. But when I heard what I heard the first day, um, I told my wife, who went with me the first day, that I've got to go back, and I went back every day of the trial. Then, and you have to understand that's the first our family heard any of this information that was put out of the trial, the testimony, the documents that were presented, and so on. So it was really took me back to sit there every day and then see the pictures, the murder scene pictures,
Wow.
listen to Lieutenant Keenan and Sergeant Marks that Claudia mentioned, their testimony, and it was just unbelievable that
Okay.
So
the
tell me, you
diocese
you made
could do that.
it sounds like it sounds like you were, given the same covered up stuff that everybody else was. So
Right.
what is your family doing between the early 80s and the 2000, 2006? Do you just, is it okay? It's a shame she passed. Oh, it's who knows what, or is there something eating at you guys? I mean, I can't imagine these conversations for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, my family um, were all Catholic. I'll say pretty strict Catholics. So they trusted, first of all, they trusted God that He was going to take care of this. And they trusted the church and the diocese that, never would have imagined in 1980, none of this sexual abuse or very little of it, allegations and all these other things that Claudia was talking about had come out then. So they had no reason to really doubt anyone or anything. So they were just, I guess, living in faith that maybe someday the murderer would be arrested. And and again, going back 1980, basically from day one, the police and the Diocese of Toledo knew that for sure that Father Robinson was a prime suspect, but they basically knew that he did it. And there's one thing that really sticks with me, and it's Peggy Lester. She was the manager of the physical therapy department at Mercy Hospital. She was working the morning of the murder, and she saw Father Robinson come out of the chapel at the time 7 to 7:30 in the morning, the time frame that the murder happened, and go around the corner and go down the hallway and so on. She was told by a supervisor that day, said, if you want to keep your job, probably shouldn't say anything about that. And then
Hmm.
a few days
Wow.
later, Bishop James Hoffman came to the hospital, to Mercy Hospital. Peggy Lester was called into an office where he was at, and he basically convinced her to not to say anything about what happened that day at all, to keep quiet. And she did for, I think it was 32 years. She never
Wow.
said a word. 2012, Detective Tom Ross through circumstances, another lawyer, there was a car accident that Peggy Lester was involved in, and they started talking about this. So Tom Ross took a sworn statement from her that this happened. So, but our family never knew that Father Robinson was even a suspect until 2004 when he was arrested. The murder was
Wow.
in 1980. 2004 is the first time, and I verified that with my aunts. Um, and another thing, 1980 again, the diocese of police knew that at the minimum, Father Robinson was the prime suspect at that time, right after the murder. Father Father Gerald Robinson was the celebrant for my aunt's funeral mass.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I think 3 days after the murder, I think the funeral was. They allowed him to have her mass. Unbelievable.
And
Wow.
at that time, you don't know nothing about nothing, but yeah, that's quite a kick in the gut there now, especially when you find out about it. All right. Before I get to the big question of why we're all here, but thank you both for, and I know there's probably a lot more you can tell us, and I know there's, and I want, but I want to keep it. I want to get to why we're together, but first, before I do that, and this may sound like a dumb question. Do we know why? Did anything ever come out on why in the hell anyone would go after a nun? Why would it doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-mm.
I don't think, no. The answer to that is probably no. I have my thoughts, my suspicions that with all the satanic part of it and so on that came out, and he had been accused of other abuses before this and so on there. My aunt was a very strong lady. She had bachelor of science degrees. You know, you have to remember she went in to become a nun in 1927. So I don't think there
Wow.
was a lot of women even went to college, let alone get
Right.
degrees. So she had a
Oh,
degree.
sure.
She was a registered nurse. She had a degree in education, and she taught. She was a nurse. She had many supervisory positions over the years. She was administrator of Mercy Hospital in Tiffin, Ohio. And you probably all know St. Charles Hospital in Toledo. She was the
Mhm.
administrator of St. Charles Hospital.
Wait, she's a
And
woman. You can't do that, especially back
well,
in the day, right?
back in the 50s, she was the administrator.
Oh, that's
So
wild.
St. Charles,
Wow.
I don't know how many employees she had at that time, or was over several thousand, 3,000, I think I heard, or something like that. Um, but she wasn't ready to retire in 1971. She had been involved in, working in all these positions all these years, and she wasn't ready just to sit in the rocking chair. So she took the job of sacristan in 1971, went to Mercy Hospital, and what that job is you take care of the chapel, basically.
Okay.
So she was there from 1971 until 1980 when she was murdered. And Gerald Robinson came there as the chaplain in 1974, I believe. So they worked together basically every day from 1974 to 1980.
Wow. Okay. Um, uh, let's get to this question. We've come together because of a sign, and not a sign from the Lord, but an actual sign. What is this all about? So, Lee, Claudia, anybody wants to answer this? What's the deal with this signage?
So there is it's no secret. Lee and I will never try to tell you that Monsignor Schmidt didn't do great things in the community, and we will never try to tell you he didn't do great things for Mud Hens baseball. And that's why he got honored with that public street sign and was inducted into the Toledo City Civic Hall of Fame for all of his great works and the things that he's done. We dispute none of that. Where we draw the line hard in the sand is that it's those same power and influence that he wielded that got those good things done that he used to cover up the murder of an innocent nun and allow a murderer to roam free in our community for 24 years. And who we honor matters. And the message that sends to leave that honor up, it just can't be in a civilized society. Insult to injury, that sign was dedicated on the anniversary of her murder. You can't make that
Lord.
stuff up. It was dedicated on April 5th, 2002, on the anniversary of her murder. And so, like I said, naively, I thought after the conviction, they're going to quietly go take the sign down. I used to drive down and drive around and see if it was still up.
This has Robinson's name on it or the Monsignor's name on it?
Monsignor Schmidt. It's
Okay,
Monsignor
okay,
Schmidt.
okay.
So the man that covered up the murder of Father Robinson, the man that was working the front of the house and the back of the house, working with the police, working with the diocese, trying to make this go away. I mean, Father Robinson was never even arrested. And it's important to know that the Toledo Catholic Diocese, despite earlier public claims that they never paid for his legal fees, when they did those 2 no-knock search warrants, Detective Tom Ross wrote a letter that we now have that indicates that he saw the receipt that the Toledo Catholic Diocese paid $10,000 in 1980 to Father Robinson's lawyer for his legal defense, a man that was never even arrested. Now, I want to put that in perspective. For $10,000 in 1980, I Googled it. That's $40,415.05 in today dollars. That was
Oh,
life-changing
yeah.
money back then. So clearly the diocese put a full court press on burying this, and it makes no sense. And you asked me earlier, Holly, why does this case bother me so much? Well, to me, it's more of the same and what that sign means. I mean, I talk to crime victims who have been clergy sexual abuse victims that can't even walk in to Mud Hen Stadium because of what that sign has come to mean to them. That they that the taxpayers have by leaving that sign up, you are normalizing the cover up of a murder. And here's the thing: if you'll cover for murder, you'll cover for anything. Clergy sexual abuse victims really never stood a chance, and that was my sobering reality during the Father Robinson trial. Because if you'll cover for murder, what else won't you cover for? So it's dedicated on the anniversary of her murder to the man that worked so hard to get that case buried. Now, he lacked the authority that Deputy Vetter had. It was Deputy Vetter that threw out the detectives from their own interrogation. But we all know it's power and influence that moves authority. And you need not look any further than Google or the news or every day outside your door to see it's power and influence that moves authority. And that's what it took to shut this down in 1980. And that's what, the Toledo Catholic Diocese was trying to do with their own review board in 2003. So we thought the sign would come down automatically. We thought they'd quietly take it down and go about their, because the whole world, the trial was televised live on court television. It was covered by the national media, the local media, gavel to gavel. They had the journalists all in one area and a media pool. Court TV was here. Nancy Grace covered the highlights on television. Beth Karras was here, gavel to gavel. AP, Reuters. I mean, they were all there. So everyone was covering this trial. So the role of Monsignor Schmidt came out very organically during the trial. His role in interrupting that interrogation, in working the front of the house and the back of the house, and those Father Ray Fisher letters that came out, showing his involvement, that came out very organically in the trial. And so we just thought, of course, they're going to take that public street sign down. We're not going to normalize this kind of behavior. And, you asked me, Holly, why did this bother me so much? She was a Catholic nun. She, at the age of 19, forfeited all her worldly possessions, gave up her friends, put her family on the back burner, and devoted her life to Christ. And I can't say I've ever lived that good of a life. I'd like to think I've done a few good things, but certainly not like that. At age 19, she gave it all up. And then she died in service to God, preparing the chapel that morning for Easter. I mean, this was a woman who walked the walk, who talked the talk, whose actions matched her words. She'd been a mercy nun for over 50 years of her life, broke a lot of glass ceilings as an administrator during a time when many women couldn't even go to college. She had really devoted her life to this community specifically. And so as a woman, I can't figure out is the diocese still circling the wagons now to keep that sign up because her life didn't matter? Did they circle the wagons then around Father Robinson because she was a woman and her life didn't matter, or because she was a nun and he was a priest? I don't know. I find it unsettling and extremely troubling. And so Lee and I, we met 20 years ago at the trial, and for 20 years, we have been working over the years quietly, sometimes publicly, sometimes quietly, trying to get that sign down. We've been given knuckles and elbows. We've approached the diocese. We've approached the mud hens. We've approached every mayor's group since the conviction. We've gotten ridiculous excuses from, I'm running for office, I don't want backlash, to the mud hens are having a good season, to, if you know what's good for you, you'll let this go. But this year in particular, April 5th was Easter. It was also the day she was murdered. And it was the day the sign was dedicated. And it all lined up on April 5th this year. And, WTOL did a documentary recently, and there have been other documentaries out there, but they did a local documentary focusing on the cover-up, because in order to understand this murder case, you have to understand the cover-up that was going on during this time, right? And so this year I wrote all of city council, and and Lee joined me in that effort. And we wrote the honor board, and the honor board wrote us back that it's a newly convened board by the city of Toledo, and they said, we're going to have a meeting, we'll let you know how it goes. And we called them up and we said, that would have worked 20 years ago, might have worked 15 years ago, but it doesn't work now. And I'll tell you why. When Channel 11 was shooting their B-roll, Lee and I were standing down below the sign. And I said to Lee, I'm so sorry this has taken 20 years. I'm good for another 20 or 25. I renew my commitment. And Lee looked at me and he was being cheeky and he was being funny. He said, Claudia, I'm not. And I said, is this proving to be too much? And he said, no, in 25 more years, I'll be 99. And it just didn't sit right with me. And I realized his family has been carrying this since 1980.
Yeah.
1980, that's a long time. No murder families should have to grovel to get a public street sign down honoring someone that helped delay justice in the brutal murder, stabbed 31 times murder of their loved one. No crime victim's family should have to go through that.
Not at all.
Not
No.
at all.
No.
Claudia, let me ask you, and Lee, and you can jump in if you want to, but I technically have two more questions, because the last one's gonna let you guys run, and I want to know exactly what. Uh, let me be the devout, and I'm not, but let me be the devout Catholic that can't handle this story. This is all a bunch of craziness. First, do you have written proof on some of the stuff you're saying here? Can you prove these things that you're saying to me?
All of it. It's the unrefuted court trial transcript, which is what we tried to impart to the honor board. The words of William Keena, Lieutenant Keena, and Art Marks, 52 years police experience between them. That is a historical record. It's a trial transcript, and it was unrefuted. We have a letter from Julia Bates, the Lucas County prosecutor, that speaks directly to Schmidt's involvement. We have a very detailed letter from one of her lead investigators, Detective Tom Ross, also involved with this case, that details the $10,000 the diocese paid, the no-knock search warrants, and the Schmidt's involvement. So, and we have the immortal words of Lieutenant Keena and Art Marks, and we have the Ray Fisher letters that were gleaned that you can pull from those. Those were also admitted into trial, and they were gotten from the no-knock search warrants executed on the diocese in 2004 when they weren't cooperating. So, the Toledo Catholic Diocese will make the argument that there's no new evidence being presented. They're partially right. I don't know that the $10,000 had been made public, but they're partially right. This information has been out there, but now it's time to act on it. And it's time to take that sign down, because who we honor matters. And there are dozens and dozens of examples across this country where honors have been removed from people who have never been tried in court, but enough compelling evidence exists of their wrongdoing that overshadows the good that they did. And really a public honor for a public person, it's a tacit acknowledgement from a community of acceptance, and it normalizes, and we don't want to normalize horrific behavior, and covering up the horrific murder of a nun. We can't honor that.
And we don't even know quite all of the other abuses and things that went on. We really don't, because of how much it was covered up. So
Right.
I'm like I said earlier, I'm very glad you guys both came out to do this. So Holly, you might have another question or two, but my final question is, and we're going to post the hell out of this, when we're done with this interview, of course. But if anyone is listening to this and watching this and they're like, oh yeah, I can't believe it's happening either, how can they help? What do they need to do right now to help? And by the way, you're not asking for millions and millions and millions of dollars. You're asking for one thing that seems to be common sense to me. So how do people help right now?
Pick up the phone, call your city council leader. We'll give you an email that when they send it, it goes to all of city council, and tell them who we honor matters and to take that sign down for all that it stands for all the bad that it stands for. We don't argue that he did good things. He did. But covering up the murder, we can't look past that. We cannot
Oh
honor
no.
someone that obstructed murder, obstructed and thwarted justice of the murder of an innocent nun. You can call your city council person. You can call the mayor's office. You can call the Mud Hens and ask them to disavow themselves from this. Their logo's on that publicly posted taxpayer street sign. You can say who we honor matters. Get that sign down, not just for the Pahl family, and not just for Sister Margaret Ann, but for all crime victims and all victims of violence out there, particularly ones that can't even walk in that stadium anymore because of what that sign has come to represent. So we will give you that email address that will go, but you can pick up the phone and leave a message for your mayor, leave a message for the Mud Hens, leave a message for your city council person. And you can you can repost your broadcast, you can share, you can talk about this, you can send a letter to the editor. You can come to the vote on July 14th. At City Council at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Any of those things.
Holly will get us all that information, or you guys will obviously to Holly. We'll get all that posted. And I'm thinking of how to do this. I'm thinking you call a couple of maintenance guys. They go out there with a ladder. It disappears, and we move on with our lives. Now, I'm not trivializing sister. I'm not the sister's life at all. I'm not any of the. But the simple act of doing that, I can see exactly what you both are saying. This is just a kind of a, every time you walk by it. And
That's
so
right. That's
this
exactly
is not
right.
this is not a parade. That's two guys with a ladder and a
And
couple
some
of
snips.
screwdrivers, and
Right.
it's gone.
Yeah.
So why the hell is such a thing? I don't know. So all right. Claudia, thank you for going on with us. Lee, thank you for being here representing the family. I can't even imagine the roller coaster of emotions that goes on with both of you. I mean, you want to believe, and then you hear otherwise, and then it's oh my God. So, Holly, can you think of any other questions?
Sister
I'm sorry,
Sister Margaret Ann deserved better than this. 53 years of her life was devoted to the Diocese of Toledo. They knew from day one what was going on. They know today what was going on, regardless what they say now.
Right.
The time's come to take care of this. It's not
never too
going
late
to
to do the
make,
right thing.
yes, to do the right thing. It's not going to bring Sister Margaret Ann back, obviously, but she deserved better than that. And that sign needs to come down.
And City Council has a very clear roadmap to do the right thing here. They can argue they didn't know in 1999 when he was inducted into the City Hall of Fame. They can argue they didn't know in 2002 when he was given that public street sign, but they knew in 2006. And every mayor's office since then has known, and we all know now there have been 5 books, multiple documentaries, and quite a bit of press, both local, national, and international press covering this case because of it being the very first diocesan priest to murder a mercy nun. It's a big deal, and who we honor matters. The system not only failed Sister Margaret Ann, they failed her family, and they continue to fail her family by allowing that sign to stand. They can do the right thing. They can take it down. There's got to be somebody more deserved to honor than someone who thwarted justice for 24 years in the murder of a nun.
Certainly. Holly, any last minute questions for these guys, since we kept them here a little longer than I wanted to on a holiday weekend? So thank you both, by the way, for doing this. But
thank you.
Anything else you can think of right now?
Well, I would love to have you both back after the 14th to perhaps provide us with an update. if nothing changes, what are your next steps to keeping this alive and making sure that Sister Margaret gets what she, deserves? And that's to have that sign taken down.
Well, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say we don't have to deal with that.
I sure hope
I
not.
think with all the documentations that, especially the documents that Claudia talked about and all that, the path to taking this sign down is very clear.
Right.
And I have confidence that the councilmen, the council women will see this, will do their due diligence, research these documents.
That we've provided to them.
Yes, they have the documents. So I think I don't see another path to this, but strange things happen. I understand that.
But the short answer to your question is we're not going away. We've been at this for 20 years. We will continue to stay at this. I'm good for another 20 to 25 years. God forbid, even if I'm carrying Lee in an urn in my arm next to me. We met under the worst of circumstances. I met the Pahl family under the worst of circumstances. It's been a long road, and there's a clear path to do the right thing, and it's just never too late to do the right thing.
All right, guys, that's awesome. Also, for those who are watching and listening, any questions about it? Did you miss something? Are you not quite sure of something? We will send questions off to both of these guys here. So podcast through it at gmail.com at any time you want, and we will get you some answers. But it's a simple, it ain't tough, people. It's not tough at all. This is
right.
But what it represents is gigantic. So anyway, Lee, once again, thank you much. Claudia, thank you very much for doing this. As Holly said, let's do this again here soon, get some updates. But I'd like to hear more. I want to hear what's going on and pay closer attention, because usually I'm off in my own little world, but this is a bigger darn deal than, and you know what? This is a bigger darn deal than it should be.
Right.
You should automatically know. You're honoring the nun. You're honoring all the victims. Everybody is a simple act could honor a lot of people at once.
Bring some restorative justice and a little bit of healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could certainly use that in the world. Thank you all for having us. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you much again. Once again, any questions for either one, for Lee or for Claudia, podcast through it at gmail.com. Have a great rest of your day. This has been a presentation of the Through It podcast. Conversations about surviving, healing, and growing, with your hosts Holly Rogers and Paul Spurl. Questions or comments about one of the episodes, or if you want to be a sponsor of the Through It podcast, email us anytime, podcastthroughit@gmail.com. Produced and sponsored in part by the Entertainment Network, enterthenetwork.com. Thanks very much for listening and being with us while we get through it.